Hey guys, Ranger here, and welcome back to another video. And I've been wanting to do this video for a while. I just kind of kept forgetting to do it, or deciding to do another video instead. But I wanted, I know a couple of people enjoy videos like this where I tell you about stories of things that have happened to me. But I wanted to share with you the time that one of my bosses and I had a very heated discussion. Basically, my boss and I were pretty much at each other's throats in at this particular point, and I wanted to share this video with you guys. Now, some of you might not agree completely with what I did in this video. Some of you might not agree with what I did in this story, but this legit happened, and I don't regret it. So it's over. It's done with. My boss, literally, one of my bosses at the time, uh, literally got on to me for blowing my nose. And this is an interesting story, and I actually think it's funny now, which it was funny then too. But what happened? I just got to work, started working, and I've been working for maybe about 30 minutes, and I felt the need to blow my nose. I felt my nose was tickling, and I needed to blow my nose. And I'm kind of a germaphobe in a way, so I'm not the kind of person to just go blowing my nose on my hand randomly. So I went back to a different department where a security camera was clearly watching me. And I was in full view of the security camera. I go back, I wash my hands a couple of times real quick, tear off a paper towel to blow my nose. Next thing I know, this dickwad comes through these double doors into this other department, and he looked at me with this very hateful look and said, "There's stuff out on the floor. Come on, let's go." And immediately, he pushed my wrong button. I stopped what I was doing. I wiped my nose, and I just looked at him and said, "I'm very much aware of that. Thank you. I'm very much aware of that." And so I go back out there, and at that point, I knew he was in a bad mood, and he was taking it out on me. So it turns out that karma was on my side that night. I went back to work, and in less than 5 minutes, I hear a guy that used to work there some years ago, walk up to this guy. The second guy always called this boss. He always called him Boss Man. That was his nickname for him. Even whenever he quit and he would see him, I would always hear him say, "Hey, Boss Man." So immediately, when the moment that I heard whenever I heard this guy's voice say, "Hey, Boss Man," I grinned because I knew karma was on my side that night. And every time that this guy walks in and these two start talking, it it would several minutes or longer would pass. He wouldn't this the same guy who got on to me for literally blowing my nose uh would never you would not see him doing anything for 10 minutes at least whenever he was talking to this guy and him on the clock. So I looked at my watch to see what time it was and saw that it was about 11. It was probably about 11 40 something. I think it was about like 11:41. So I said to myself, all right, all right. So I kept working, and after about 10 minutes, I looked at my watch and it was 11:51. It was 10 minutes later, and I remember at that point my anger was rising because this guy literally got onto me for blowing my nose, and I was not even back there in this other department at the sink for 5 minutes. Yet here he is over here talking to another guy for 10 minutes. No, no, you don't do that to me. No, you do not tell me to do something if you're not going to do it yourself. No, that's not how I roll. Now keep in mind this guy was one of my bosses, and some people would not be willing to say anything to their boss. However, I'm not like that. I'm not someone that tucks my tail between my legs and walks away like a whipped pup. No. I didn't care what this guy could do to me. I was not going to let him get away with it. I was not going to let him treat me like a doormat. So I stopped what I was doing. I walked over to where he was, and I remember walking right up to him, tapped him on his shoulder, and said, "Didn't you tell me that there was work to do?" He had his phone out and showing this other guy something on his phone. He looked up at me, and if looks could kill, I would have exploded into molecules at that point. I remember he looked up at me and he said, "I did, and there is. Get back to work." And I said, "Why aren't you? Why?" And I was grinning. I was grinning and laughing here. And I said, "Why don't you get back to work?" He said, "I've been working. What have you been doing?" I said, "Working. What have you been doing?" And he was getting more and more furious. I was still laughing as I was backing away. I was still laughing about it. I wasn't saying it angry, but he was. And he told me again, "Get back to work." And I said, "I will whenever you get back to work." And at that point, I turned the corner, walked away. And I wanted him to know that I wasn't going to let someone tell me to get back to work and then here he is slacking. Boss or not, I don't care what your position is. You do not tell me to do a job and then here you are slacking. I'm not going to let that slide. I don't handle biased people. Mm-mm. I do not do well with biased double standard people. I don't. And a few minutes, it was not even 10 minutes later. This guy walks over to where I am. He stops, looks me dead in the eye, and said, "Let's get something straight. I am your boss. You do what I say." I stopped what I was doing and I looked up at him and said, "Don't go being biased on me. Do not tell me to do something if you're not going to do it yourself." And it's kind of funny because I kind of backed him into a corner because he couldn't really say anything else. He couldn't really say very much more. The only thing that he said at that point, he asked me what was I doing back there, eh, and I said I was blowing my nose. And I remember he just had this funny, he shook his head with a oh my gosh kind of expression, and if I had it to do over with, I would have looked at him and said, "Oh, I'm sorry. Should I have blew my nose on you instead?" Or I'll just go ahead and blow my nose on my hand randomly, and then whenever I get sick, I'll make sure to breathe on you. All right? I wish I could go back in time and tell him that, but I was just more or less processing him acting like it was stupid of me to go back and blow my nose and like to actually take the time to wash my hands and blow my nose. Like cleanliness should not be a thing. And then he repeated again that he was my boss and I need to do what he says. And at that point, I realized that I was mentally processing, I was mentally analyzing this douchebag. And I realized at this point that that was the only thing that he could say. And so I repeated the same thing that I told him. Don't tell me to do something if you're not going to do it yourself. And at that point, he said, "I am your boss. You are underneath me." I remember the only thing that he could repeat was that same line. "I am your boss. You do what I say." And that time, he didn't give me time to say anything else. He walked off. And I started laughing. And I made sure, and I was laughing, and I know he heard me laughing as he walked away. But it was at that point I realized that I kind of backed him into a corner in a way because that was the only thing he could repeat. That was the only thing he could say is, "I'm your boss." And I learned a few things about him at that particular moment. Number one, he was one of those kinds of people that use their position, use their authority over you, and they will happily flaunt their position over you, and they will use it to their advantage. Like, "I'm your boss, you do what I say." And it wasn't about balance, it wasn't about equality, working with someone. The fact is, I I knew that he could not say much at this point because he had told me, he had got on to me for literally blowing my nose. Yet I had caught him talking to this other guy while on the clock for like 10 minutes, not doing anything. So he had done worse than I did. And the funny thing is, both of what we did was in clear view of a security camera. So I knew that I didn't care if he tried to say anything to higher up management because the evidence spoke for itself. And I didn't care what he said or did. And I realized, like I said, that he was one of those people that likes to flaunt his position and his authority over top of you. And if you challenge that authority, that's the only thing he could say. And I mean, he seemed, in my mind, thinking back on it right now, it seemed pretty immature of him to keep telling me, I'm your boss, you do what I say. That's like the only thing that he could say to me. And I repeated, I know that I kept repeating, uh, don't be biased. Don't tell me to do something if you're not going to do it yourself. And yeah, it was probably immature of me to keep telling him that, but I wanted to let him know that I wasn't going to deal with someone biased. I was not going to deal with someone who was going to tell me to get back to work, but then it's totally fine for him to slack off. Boss or not, I wanted him to know I wasn't going to deal with it. I wasn't going to put up with it. And I also wanted him to know that I'm not some little puppy, that I was not a little puppy that was going to tuck my tail between my legs and let him get away with things. I wanted him to know I'm going to stand up for myself and I'm going to talk back to him if a situation like that arises. And I think at that point, I kind of maybe made him see that a bit. And I remember after that little confrontation, we had never, like, we had never, I had never had an argument with him like this before. But I remember it was a good 3 months. He didn't talk to me for a good straight 3 months after that. It was like I was just a wisp of air. He ignored me. And it was a great 3 months. It honestly was because I had peace and quiet. I didn't have to worry about this little nut licker. It was peaceful. And so, but then I remember after about 3 months, he came over to me one night and he started telling me something that I didn't give a crap about, which he started talking, he tried to start a conversation with me about a friend of his that told him something about, uh, Britney Spears had more number one hits than, someone else. I don't remember who it was. And I'm just thinking to myself, I don't care. I don't give a crap who has more number one hits. Both have good music. That's all I care about. I don't care who who has more number one hits. But yeah, like I said, I wanted to share the story with you guys because this I think is a really funny thing. And also there is now to add to that story, he did later get fired, but not for not for confronting me. No. Here's the kicker. After this little bitch decided to confront me about something so stupid as blowing my nose, it was less than a year later. He ended up getting fired because he missed too many days. He started dating this woman, which was essentially a whore and which was essentially a whore and a pill whore. She was a drug addict, and he started missing days. And I remember the night that I went to work, and he was supposed to be there, and he wasn't there. And I remember thinking, oh great, he called in again, or he missed again, great. And the funny thing I remember, particularly about this moment, was everybody was quiet about it. Like nobody wanted to say anything. I have never in my life had a moment at work where it felt like I was working for like the FBI or the CIA, and everything was completely covert. Nobody wanted to say anything. Nobody said anything. And the I remember the maintenance guy walked up to me and he was whispering and he asked me, "Did you hear about what happened to him?" And I said, "No, what?" He said, and this maintenance guy said, "He got arrested." I'm like, "What?" And I'm like, "What happened?" He said, "I don't know. I just heard that he got arrested." And I'm like, and I started laughing. I'm like, "Yes, he got fired. Yes." And I was happy that he got fired because this guy, yeah, he was one of those people who will talk to you to your face one way, but then he has no problem with stabbing you behind your back whenever you turn your back. I learned that the hard way a long time before this. And so I was happy to see him finally gone. And I remember I kind of, at that point, I started paying attention. And I started listening to what people would say around work to see if anyone would even mention it. But it was like nobody wanted to say anything. It was like they were trying to protect him. And it was like they were completely trying to protect him and not say anything. And so I knew it would come out, if he was arrested, it would come out in the local newspaper that following Wednesday. Paper came out. I got a paper, flipped to, immediately went to the arrested section. Actually, no. No, that was the second day. No, I had left work. I stopped at a gas station to get gas. And while I was inside waiting to pay for the gas, someone was in front of me. I picked up a newspaper and I started flipping through it, and immediately, boom, there was the guy. He was indicted November 30th for assault and battery on a family member. And I remember, like, oh my gosh! And so the next day that I worked, whenever I clocked out, myself and a couple of other guys were walking, and they have this little newspaper stand, and I remember in front of the other guys, I picked the paper up and said, "Hey, did you hear what happened to him? Look, he got arrested. Assault and battery." And I said it loud enough that everybody heard it. Because I didn't like feeling like they were trying to protect this guy. Like, I mean, I already knew. The moment he got arrested, he was terminated. He wasn't coming back. But it irked me that they were, like, I noticed that a few of the people, they would still talk about him in present tense, like he was still there, like he was still coming back. They wouldn't talk about him in past tense. And so I was getting aggravated over that week, over the next few days, after I found out that he got fired, that it seemed like people were trying to protect him. So I kind of wanted other people to know, hey, he's not coming back. So I held up the paper and I said, hey, did you hear what happened to him? And so, yeah. And I remember after finding out about that, I thought uh, of putting the newspaper in the printer, enlarging the photo, and it kind of blowing it up. And I thought about putting underneath it a quote from one of Queen's song, "Another One Bites the Dust." I really thought about doing that. But yeah, it was hilarious that he ended up later getting fired for because he got arrested, because again, his life started starting to go to crap after he met this woman. And it was just funny. Like, whenever I found out he got fired, I thought, huh, bitch, that's what you get for getting on to me for blowing my nose. That's what you get. Karma. But yeah, I wanted to share with you guys a story because I thought it was funny. I wanted to share with you guys a story of whenever one of my bosses and I had a confrontation, and how later he got his butt kicked out. So yeah, thought you guys would enjoy that, but again, wanted to share that with you guys. So hope you guys enjoyed, and hopefully I will see you guys in the next video that I do. Take care.